Hi, everybody, and welcome to The Quantum Bridge with me, Casper, my co-host, Gary. And today we're very fortunate again to have Jo with us to talk about various aspects of her life and specifically again to touch on architecture and where her particular style of architecture comes from, the genesis for that. And I'll pass over to Gary to take us into that conversation.
Thanks, Casper, and welcome to the show again, Jo. It's good to have you back.
Thank you. Well,
we're going to cover, we went through a lot last time, so it'd be nice to find out how you transitioned from your traditional architecture and where these other ideas came from, really. So if you could expand a bit on that for us, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Sure. So I'll start in the beginning. So just to kind of recap a bit of a journey, I came to Australia when I was 10 from the UK on a boat, 10-pound pom, as they call us, and I was very much drawn to space. So very much drawn to looking at how things were put together, how they were made. So on the ship, the engineer took a shining and let me walk around the ship with him. And we go into all the different various aspects. And I remember looking at and going, wonder how they meant to pull that deep. And then what was the underside of this and how would they have, I mean, I was 10, so I don't even know how I was even thinking like that, but I was. And then I was obviously desperately wanting to avoid singing Kumbaya, My Lord, with all the other kids. So I was just literally running around the ship looking at shapes and patterns and the sizes and dimensions. So when I came into Sydney Harbour, there was still cranes on the Opera House. And I remember thinking, wow, what an impressive building. Well, even if it was 90% finished. And then went to high school and was incredibly lucky. I just think I was obviously looked after and guided by the universe all the way. That my very good friend at school, her father was Professor Peter Webber, who was the Dean of the Sydney Uni of the Architecture Faculty. And he also worked on his company, took over where Utzon took off with Hallbo and Webber. So it was a combination of an architecture firm. So I grew up going around to her house and all their models and everything. And when I was going to graduate, I said, oh, I want to be an art teacher. And he said, oh, don't do that. Just go to architecture. And I said, yeah, that's my second on the list. And he goes, no, make it your first, because you can always teach art later if you want to. So I said, oh, yeah. Anyway, went for it, got into Sydney Uni. And I always found there was a bit of a club there. That club is, if you design certain things a certain way, then you were to the top of the tree, and if you didn't, it was a bit of a hit and miss situation. So I was at uni with some very clever people, some who ended up being comedians. One was Vince Sorrenti, who's an incredibly funny guy. I have lots of stories on another time with that, but we did architecture reviews, we got up on the stage, we acted, and we had a lot of fun. But I always remember with design, for me, it was always intuitive. So it always downloaded in. So I'd always go, like if something was an issue and I saw the problem and I reframed it, and then literally in that intuitive moment, something powerful would always come in. So for me, it was a bit hit and miss with some of the, if I was aligned with the project or not. So because there were all various different design studio, projects that you had to undertake to graduate. So then fast forward, had children, and I went out and I worked in the industry, but basically then I got like absolute shits with working 70, 80 hours a week on like bloody slave labor rates. As what they do to graduates in architecture. And I went, this is not even fun. I was hand drawing everything, like, the set square and the T-roll. And I'm like, oh, I don't want, this is just boring. So I went out and did furniture sales, but high level. And then there was some design involved. And then I went into kind of more the interiors side because it was more fun. And then as I came back to having children, I got a phone call to do a small extension, and I thought, well, I don't really want to go back with small children and go back and work, full time. So then that finished that project. Clients loved it. Went on to the next project, which was a referral, and then it just kept on going. Before I knew it, I've got like 3 staff, and I'm, working 3-4 days a week, and I think to get a nanny to help with the kids, and then I've got asked to do some teaching at New South Wales Uni and Sydney Uni, and I did, and it was all very overwhelming trying to juggle it all, including the kids. So then after a while, I realised, and this is anyone from Sydney Uni who's listening to this will probably might agree or disagree, but really the architecture system or the profession here is very much I don't want to use the term boys club because there's lots of women architects, but it's the old type of club. If you don't do what they want you to do, then you're not going to be recognised, accoladed, whatever. And
so Joe, just to say, did that feel like an extension of the time when you were at university then? Is it very much a thing of, look, there is this way, and you either fit into that mold or you don't, and if you don't, you're penalised, not necessarily overtly, but there's an undertone of you being penalised, and that you gradually found that actually the quote unquote real world was not dissimilar to that.
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head, 100%. So it was like, basically, then I'm literally just, I was designing lots of houses and renovations and a small little scale. There was some apartment units and some holiday places, and but what I found was that you needed to almost be a psychologist to deal with, mums and dads and houses and people and different personalities, and I found it to be quite intense because they don't teach you psychology at uni, and it's not even the psychology that we're all talking about. It's more like how to understand someone's inner landscape. So how do you deal with them? So then as a result of that, in 2007, I went off and did what was called at the time Magician's Way, which is basically learning intuition and alchemy. And you actually specifically learn how to do readings, how to look at someone's inner landscape, turn lead into gold, which basically lead is their current reality and gold represents what their heart wants. So I applied that in architecture. So I could actually go, well, let's drill down. You've got this situation here where you don't like your neighbor, or you don't like the house, or it's not aligned, or you're getting like annoyed with having to come home in this space that doesn't feel like a sanctuary. What's your vision? So let's talk about what is your heartfelt vision? So that's how that process started. And then,
Joe, can I just ask? Sorry to cut in, but can I just ask, because that's a really interesting thing that you've just touched on there. Where did that come to you somehow? This sort of magical school, so to speak. Did you find that because suddenly you just happened to align with that type of energy and other people who brought you to that? Did that fortuitously turn up in your life? Can you give a little bit more context to how that came about?
Yeah, sure. That is a really good question because again, it was the serendipity of the universe. So I was at what's called a BNI event, which is business networking, where you swap referrals, and I was there religiously every Friday morning, like looking out for Bob the builder or the plumber or whatever, and waiting to get back my referrals. And basically one of the guys I was sitting next to gave me Abraham Hicks' book, and I just went, oh, that's interesting, I'll take, he said lent it to me. I took it home, and I was like, this is a really good book. And I hadn't heard of anything like that. It was like, it's life-changing.
But you were immediately open to that, Joe, because actually, just to say, that book and that territory, that landscape in itself is not something that would necessarily resonate with everybody. Somebody might have taken that book and used it as a doorstop, for example, and never actually engaged with it.
Absolutely. And the guy that recommended it to me was a little bit kind of on the edge of the peripheral anyway. Like he was, so I was just right for the moment. And then I actually ended up telling my sister, I said, you need to read this book. And So they went to like a specialist metaphysical spiritual bookstore, and they were trying to find the book. And my brother-in-law actually, this book dropped on the floor, and it was Magician's Way by William Whitecloud.
Right.
And it's actually quite an incredible book about focus creates your reality, and about learning how to do intuition, and turning lead into gold, what's going on, stopping and look at your current inner landscape. So we were doing lots and lots of readings on each other. My brother-in-law said maybe this is the book she meant, because he couldn't remember the name of the Abraham Hicks book. Yeah. So he said, no, this must be it. So they took it home. He read it from front page to back page, and then gave it to my sister, and then rang me 2 days later and said, oh, that was the best book ever. And I went, really? You read it that fast? But it's like this thick. Yeah. And he went, well, which book are you talking about? And I said, the Abraham Hicks. And he goes, no, this is the book. This is the Magician's Way book. And I went, oh, the one in the book that I recommend. He goes, no, I think you need to read it. So I go and order a copy of this one, and I couldn't put it down. I read it from, start to finish. And then my sister said to me, there's a course coming up, a weekend course in Sydney. You should attend. And then that's how it all happened. And then ended up doing the year-long training in 2009, became accredited. And, then I went to soul safaris over in Africa, and I'm sitting around this beautiful outdoor place in, Zimbabwe? It was Swaziland. And we're sitting out and there's, giraffes and everything around us, and listening to the baboons and the jackals and the hyenas. And we're sitting around this great big fire pit, and we all started to hold hands, like all of us in a circle. And we all tuned in to what is actually like in our hearts and souls of what we want to create and bring through. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so powerful. Like I just I'm in the right, place here. And what came through was that I'm here to design healing centers and places of healing, and the building itself, where the building plays a massive part in the healing of the people. And healing and wholeness is just basically about mind, body, and spirit. So it's not just going in there, you've got a cancer or something like that, or it's not. It's a metaphysical healing on all levels. And so I started to research it a lot more. And then, of course, I was way before my time, and nothing happened, and I kept putting it out there, and nothing happened, and I kept putting it out there, and I'm going, but this is what my heart wants. Why isn't it happening? And then, of course, I got distracted by what's going on in the world with, the cabal and the deep state, and started researching all of that, and all of the medical, pharmaceutical, industrial complexes, and I was just
there a particular trigger around that time for that, Jo? Was that a dissatisfaction with the fact that the universe didn't appear to be responding in kind to you, and therefore you thought, look, other material came into your world and so on that you engaged with, or can you see that there was some sort of catalyst for that?
Yeah, there definitely was. It was so my youngest daughter had a vaccine injury from the HPV, and it's basically I spent a lot of time and research, and I ended up taking her to different alternative healing. I then was totally and utterly dissatisfied with the allopathic system as a result. But what I didn't take into account was just how hard they were going to fight anybody who questions it. And so as a result of questioning it, I then realized, well, all this research I found, I go, well, what else are they not telling us? Yeah. So that led to other areas and led to other areas, and so basically it was all the lies were unfolding, and like suffering the humiliation of being called a conspiracy theorist and gaslighted and tinfoil hat and all that kind of stuff. And I had to do a lot of growing through that, because it actually did hurt at the time.
Of course.
Because I had found all this amazing information, and it was irrefutable evidence. And and I'm just being told, I lost friends, I lost respect of certain colleagues, and I it was actually a hard journey, like arriving at these places where you actually know what you've been taught is not what's actually true. And so, and then that led to, you know, looking at the political scene and the maritime law and, you know, all of those things. But along the way leading into that, I met an ex-barrister who was also caught up in unveiling everything. And her and I, we're still, you know, friends today. And she introduced me to the notion of the mystery schools, which is basically, you know, learning how to do alchemy, learning how to focus, learning how to self-heal, learning how to go into consciousness. But basically, you know, for me, healing has always been, because if you have trauma in your past, which I think most of us have in just different degrees, but basically any of that trauma, and it can be a physical trauma, it can be, you know, like a mental trauma, metaphysical trauma, that creates a fissure and it creates a belief system where you need to protect yourself or you need to fight or whatever. And so basically, you know, then that's when you attract the system, which keeps you held in that position. So
would you say that fissure that you're talking about, so that gap that opens up, it feels to me, talking to other people about this type of territory, that is almost like a certain parasite at some level, that if it's left unattended, all it's going to do is grow and have offshoots and seep out into all sorts of other aspects of your life. So in the end, you have to address it at some point.
Yeah.
So, and the ways to address that are different and manifold. And obviously you started to find ways to look at that. And it all seems to me to come back to an incorporation. So in the end, you're incorporating all of these things back and finding that wholeness again that you're touching on, which then can start to translate to things like your work, whether it be architecture or whatever that might be. Is that, do you feel that you've had that moment of, look, of recognition first, and then there must be ways to actually deal with these things, and maybe the mentorship of those around you and so on?
Absolutely.
We struggle with time now, but I'd love to hear about whether that has resonance or not for you.
Absolutely. What you said is so spot on, because it's all about the interconnectedness of the individual journey. Like my individual journey took me to uncovering, you know, things like some childhood trauma, and basically then that was like, how do I heal that? And basically not wanting to be caught in a pattern, but be willing to actually unpack and unveil everything that comes up within you. Because, you know, when you go into that dark side of the night, the long dark night of the soul, basically it's not pleasant, it's not pretty, and it's not easy. And, you know, it's something that is necessary. And a lot of people are very numb to that. And but it's not, it's just where they're at. You know, they haven't actually got to a point where they've had a catalyst. I always find a catalyst is what you know, triggers this healing journey. And the catalyst could be divorce, separation, like death or abuse or whatever. And basically, if you're not willing to unpack that, and a lot of people aren't, and I know, you know, having been there firsthand,
we
like
understand
you guys,
why.
You know, we get it, right?
Yeah.
So basically, then from there, I started to attract people like, you know, sort of like a friend told me about Victor Schauberger's book, the Water Vortex, you know, sort of energy, but also how it cleans it and revitalizes it. And then that led to sacred geometry, just studying a lot of sacred geometry, and then going off to, you know, Peru, and doing a sacred women's retreat, and and going deeper with that. And
that's it seems to me that this is what we've actually done by thinking that we're going to sort of wrap a certain area up. We've opened a whole load of other very interesting channels that I think we need to come back and touch on, in as long as you're happy to do that, Jo, in some future episodes, because the different derivations here and spin-offs and whatever are manifold and well worth going into. So given that we're coming to a point where this is going to cut us off, I'm going to have to say thank you for now, Jo. That was lovely, as always. And do consider coming back, and we can go into more depth on each of these channels together, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's, you know, obviously we didn't touch on the images and all the work we're doing, but they haven't even got up to that stage yet. So there's
that's right.
Yeah,
and I think it's important that we try and find the timeline here, because that will inform where all of that work that you're doing now has actually come from. And without that, we'll have this massive gap. So yeah, brilliant. All right. Well, look,
you guys. Lovely to connect again.
We'll see you again.
It's a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you.
So just to take us out, Gary, maybe you can do that if you'd be kind enough.
Well, we'll see you again, hopefully on the Quantum Bridge, and hopefully with Joe again.
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks,
yeah. Thank you very much,
Joe.
Joe.
Bye. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.